Live from Miami, Florida.
I am Linda.
And I am Bella.
And this is our podcast, Mostly Peaceful Latinas, where every week we will discuss current events, politics, pop culture,
and everything else related to the state of the clown world.
Well, welcome to our first episode of Mostly Peaceful Latinas.
Welcome.
This is episode 1.
Finally.
And we want to start off by introducing ourselves real quick for those of you who don't know us. We do have a following, but there will be new people, I'm guessing. So
I hope so, that more people would want to listen to us. I'm just so excited that we're here. It's only taken us
6 months.
Six months.
About 6
Some
months.
planning.
But we finally did it.
We're finally here. So, Linda, let's start off. We're going to introduce ourselves. Why don't you start off by telling us about Wake Up with Linda? Like, how is Wake Up with Linda born? How do we even get here, right? Because I know that I wouldn't even be Red Pill Babe without the influence of Wake Up with Linda. So how is Wake Up with Linda born?
So 2016 was actually the first year that I voted. I didn't become a citizen until 2014, but I was a heavy Obama fan. You know, I loved Obama. I watched his speeches in college, and I was heavily influenced by him. So 2016 comes around. It's my first time voting. I'm so excited. I voted for Hillary Clinton. I've said that before many times. And she didn't win, and I was like, "What the hell?" It's my first time voting, and the person that I voted for, and she loses, to Donald Trump. Obviously, everyone was like freaking out. The news are like, "This is the end of the world, the second coming of Hitler." Oh my God! And I was like, "Holy crap! Like this is, it's gonna be real bad for all of us."
Particularly for Latinos.
Right, particularly for Latinos. So sometime like later in 2017, I just started noticing that there was a lot of like media sensationalism. Like the media itself was just, everything that he did was negative. And I mentioned to you before, I said, why are they making a big deal out of the legalization of hemp? I find that to be even that. Like, why would they say that's a bad thing? So I started kind of just noticing all the negative press around him. And I'm like, dude, there's just no way that somebody could be so evil. And it just started getting so noticeable that one day I said, I'm unfollowing every single mainstream media outlet, the Washington Post, CNN, Vice News, everybody that I was following that influenced me. And I said, I can't watch these people anymore. What really got to me was that one day, I don't even know how, my aunt, she lives in Toronto, and she said, you got to listen to this podcast. It's a little bit out there. It's a little bit weird, but you're going to like it. I said, okay. So sometime in that, it was like a 2-hour podcast online. I can't even remember what it was called, but they start talking about human trafficking at the border. And they're saying, I know people think that Donald Trump is a racist. I know they think that he's a xenophobe, but his policies are actually like better or more humanitarian than those of the Democrats and what they're portraying in the media. And I'm like, there's just no way. So I finished listening to the podcast, and I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to start doing my own research. And so I did. And once I started doing my own research, I'm like, I can't support the Democrats anymore because I feel lied to and betrayed. Yeah. So I started a Twitter account.
Bad Florida woman?
It wasn't that one yet. That's my second one. It was actually my name. It was just Linda Catalina at the time before I switched it to like Wake Up with Linda. And I started following conservative voices. So very mainstream people, Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro. And I'm like, let me see what these people have to say. I started following Trump and Kanye. Right. And, Kanye tweeted about Candace Owens. So I started following her. And then eventually I connect with Ana Paulina Luna. She's now running for Congress in Pinellas County. And she tells me, she says, you need to start voicing your opinion. Like, you are a Latina woman, you're an immigrant, you know about the issues at the border, you know about the human trafficking, you know about all these things that are happening. Just don't have any fear. Like, I'll help you out, I'll back you up, I'll like reshare your stuff. Just start. So I started on Twitter. I made a series of videos. It was all about human trafficking. This federal indictment, it was called the Egg Farm case. So basically, I think I told you about it one time. Basically, like people here in the United States, they would go over to like El Salvador, Honduras, these very poor countries, very poor areas, and they would convince parents to let their kids come here, their teens, 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds, mostly boys, to cross the border alone to ask for asylum at the border, and they can't be turned down because they're underage. They go through this process, Office of like Refugee Resettlement gets them, and then the people here, you know, that promise work and education and all these things
To the parents back home.
Would sponsor them, and these kids ended up being trafficked, you know. So there was this huge case. They found these kids in an egg farm in Ohio, and I just started kind of just like, you know, going
down
from
the
there,
rabbit hole.
down the rabbit hole.
You realize that one thing is off.
Right.
So.
And it wasn't like conspiracy. Like I wasn't talking about like Pizzagate and these things that like we can't prove. It was like literal like federal indictment. So I'm like, okay. And then after the 2018 midterm elections, I started Wake Up with Linda on Instagram. And I switched my name also on Twitter, and I started posting like commentary and my opinion and backing things up with sources and whatnot. And I started gaining a following. I started like DC Drano already had like 1.5 million followers at this time, and he gave me a shout out one time, and like overnight I had like 5,000 followers, you know. So that is the beginning of Wake Up with Linda. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Tell us about you. How did Red Pill Babe start?
Red Pill Babe is like, thanks to you, I found you. And I'm like, I don't want to be like Linda. No, you know, I remember actually, I found you through Ana Paulina, and I remember, you know, it was 2019, and I was, after campaigning really hard, I haven't made a secret about it, 2008 and 2012 for Barack Obama, believing in the entire Hope for Change campaign. Around 2012, 2013 is when I realized that it's like, wow, this has definitely been a huge bait and switch. This is not what we expected. And because I already had like a negative connotation of the Conservative Party, I was like, great, so we don't have any home. And I became extremely black pilled, if you will, like to both sides of the same coin, no difference. It doesn't matter who you vote for. And in 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested, and I knew who he was. From quote unquote conspiracy circles, I knew he was a very bad man who had done really nasty, evil things, and that he had gotten away with it once before. And to see him get arrested, I was like, well, this is interesting news, right? And then that leads me to have that conversation with other people. And they're like, well, you know that's Donald Trump, right? And it's like, no, it's not. And it's like, well, no, it is. And you need to start doing your research. And you're too smart to buy the narrative on Trump. And I was like, all right, well, I took it as a challenge. And then I went off and I started to want to prove myself wrong. These theories, this perspective, this narrative that I had built over who Donald Trump was, I started to challenge it. I remember specifically a video that I watched where Donald Trump, it's about 8 minutes of clips dating all the way back to the 80s, where Donald Trump is disavowing white supremacy and the KKK and David Duke and all these other things that the media had never, ever shown me. And I was convinced that moment never existed. And it's like, well, no, here's a record keeping of 20 plus years where it has. And that was, I want to say that it was almost like a heartbreaking moment, because I was like, what's real? Like, what do I actually know?
Right.
So then that leads me to then start researching, like, what else can I possibly
what I had been lied
about, right? And that kind of starts the journey. So once I realized that I've been lied to, given the fact that I had been so loud for Barack Obama for such a long time and for the left, I almost feel like there's like a sense of like a damage control. Like,
right.
What
I need to do what's
right.
What have I done?
To me. Right. What have I
need to come out and just like support Donald Trump. I've been so wrong. I've been
so loud. Yeah. It's almost like a sense of responsibility where you're like, how many people have I led the wrong way, being loud and wrong? And it's like, all right, well, now I think I need to start sharing this information. So, and I started on my personal page, and very quickly people got tired of me. Immediately, my friends were like, what, you lost it? Who are you? Like, what is wrong? Family members, like, you're not okay. So then I guess self-consciously, I'm like, let me move this to an anonymous platform.
Yeah.
And that's when I start posting from red pill babe. Speaking to the wind at that point, not thinking that it's gonna go
take off or anything.
anywhere. And fast forward just months later, it was like, it just blew up. And it was 20,000 followers, 40,000 followers, and then 60 and 80. And it didn't stop there. And it went over 100. And before you knew it, there was this huge platform. And I've always described it like, oh, how did I end up in the front lines of this information war that I never in a million years that I think that I was going to end up in some kind of like leadership or influence position, much
we
less
live normal lives.
Normal lives. I had a normal, the most cookie cutter normal life. And somehow we end up in the front lines of this information warfare. And you know, I think that at that point, I find myself and I have this voice, I'm spreading this message. And at that point, it just became really important I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't alone. I wanted to find other people that were thinking like me, like, okay, wait a minute. Like, what's happened to me? Did I fall some like wild rabbit hole and like join and I remember looking out specifically for the hashtag Latinas for Trump. And that's how I found Ana Paulina, which led me to you. And I remember feeling like overwhelmed, like, okay, I'm not alone. Like, it's okay
there's
for
another brown person like me.
There's another young conservative woman that agrees with what it is that I'm saying. And I mean, that was just kind of like groundbreaking, right? Because then that leads me to finding like-minded people. And it's like when it's you alone and it's just your voice, it's very different than when you start finding other people that you're like, all right, like we're echoing this message and there could be a difference. And you know, that's when you and I I guess that's when we start crossing paths, right?
I started following Bella. I noticed she had like mutual friends here in Miami. Shout out to Marcos El Caballo, one of our great friends, also a crazy conservative. And how we really bonded was through COVID, through what was going on in 2020. And when COVID happened, the people that have been following me from day one, you know, I've been very outspoken about medical freedom and the vaccines before COVID hit, right? I was like prophesizing what was going to happen. And when COVID hit, I'm like, it's just not going to stop with the mask. It's not going to stop. Right.
You were pivotal in 2020 because I think that one of the things that really made your content stand out in 2020 was that this was still early on in the pandemic where the narrative was still like 2 weeks to stop the spread.
Yeah, and 2 weeks.
And everybody was okay in complying with that. We're like, what's 2 weeks?
Right.
And then 2 weeks turned into a month and you're like, well, okay, it's normal. You kind of expect things to go over a little bit. And at that point, your senses were already.
I was the crazy person. Like, this is never going to end, guys.
All the bells were going off.
Never going to end.
So you took a position of leadership where you became actively involved in the community. Right. You were leading. I remember the lawsuit. I remember you posting about the lawsuit and you're like, I'm suing the city. And you
the county.
The county. You were one of it's not just like a demographic. Like you weren't just a Latina woman doing that. You were one of the first influencers that was out there fighting the actual civil fight on the ground.
It was more of I went from just being an online like influencer or whatever poster on the internet to like being foot on the ground and being an actual activist. And so I started a campaign. I built a whole website overnight, like in 2 nights, like a psycho person.
I expect nothing less.
And I'm like building a website of like, this is all the lies that the government's saying, like the testing and blah, 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 and all these things, right? And then like I made like flyers with like a QR code and I was like all around like South Beach, like passing these out, like we need to fight against our rights in my rollerblades, in my bike, just like crazy, like a crazy person. And, you know, eventually I'm like calling all these like civil rights lawyers in Florida, like nobody would take the case. Like nobody wanted to sue the county. Yeah. And I was like, finally, someone, I think it was one of my followers was like, you need to contact Anthony Sabatini. He's a state rep, but he's like, because they're not working right now, he's like taking on cases about the mask and blah, 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 and all these things. I contact Sabatini. He's like, I'm so filled with work. There's no way I can take this case. And I was like, please help me. Like, I'll pay you like overnight. Like, I'll get you the money overnight. And he was like, okay, fine. So he says, this is the amount of money. I fundraised the money like in less than 24 hours, pay him the money. We start the case. And I'm like, I just started like being like literally like a pain in the ass, like every single day, like bothering the mayor, like bothering the commissioners, like it just like a pain in the behind. And, that's like when you and I became closer. Election season comes around. We start going to rallies. Season. We are trying to get, obviously Donald Trump. We were busy.
We were very busy. We were at rallies every other week at a minimum, whether it was a local rally, and they were big. I mean, Miami wasn't having small rallies.
Right.
Like, we were at rallies.
The car rallies alone were like 40,000 cars. I mean, I know. And, I think that we really, our story, or at least we became a lot closer once January 20th happens. Joe Biden becomes, installed, as we like to call it, becomes president. And we say we need to take the fight at the local level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had spent 2020 with so much of our time focused on getting Donald Trump elected. And it was kind of like that was the blinders. Like, we need to spread the information and fight the misinformation that's going on against Donald Trump on this election year. And you give it your all and you push it, you push your way through it. And then you have January 20th happen, where, again, a literal cabbage, like we like to call, the endearing term for POTUS, a literal cabbage is installed into the White House. And I remember we were not okay.
No, we were not okay.
We were not okay. We spent like 2 or 3 weeks like, this can't even be real. Like, we'd call each other
every morning. I wake up with this, like, this can't be real. Like,
for 3 hours on the phone. Like, is this really our reality? Are we really going to have to exist in this world? Yeah. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's in the White House signing executive orders. Like, they're just like fun cakes, like passing them out. 20 executive orders a day. Every executive order was like a small dagger to our heart. And I think that really became the catalyst, because we felt so hopeless that what do we do? Like, how do we fight this? What can we possibly do to counter this? And the only solution was, we need to get involved. We need to vote these people out of office.
Because we had been affected locally by the mandates, right?
Absolutely.
So we were like, okay, sure, the presidential elections is important, and Congress and midterm elections, but what about our commissioners? Like, these people like forcing masks on us and closing down the beach and having all these stupid rules.
And nobody was talking about
Nobody was talking about it. So I think that it was around like March when we saw a call to action somewhere in social media, a Patriot local meeting in Miami. We want to meet like-minded people and start getting involved. And I send it to Bella, and I'm like, look, we should just go and connect with these people, other patriots, and see like how we can help out, what we can do. Can we inform people?
I remember getting there, and it was a room filled with people kind of with the same fear and
stressed out.
Everybody was lost. It's like if they had just taken the world and we were in a one particular direction and flipped everything around on us, and all of a sudden everybody was like, where do we go from here? Which way is there now? And I remember that meeting because we showed up like just bystanders. We were in our sweatpants.
I just come from rollerblading.
Right.
I had like flip-flops and like socks. It was like so embarrassing.
We were just chilling. And I remember that the meeting starts and we, of course, are sitting in our chairs and we're like, with our head rolls, or Latina head rolls, and they're sucking our teeth. And we're like, and this is true. And of course, they're like, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
And we raised our hands. They were like, me, pick me. Then I remember you took the mic and then you handed the mic off to me, and somehow we ended up taking over the meeting.
We did.
The meeting was ours. So we absolutely took over the meeting. So I do remember that. That was back in March. And that was kind of like really the beginning of the transition from full soul content creators to actually getting involved with boots on the ground. And then that's when our efforts started
at the school board. So fast forward, we say, we have parents down our DMs. My following grew. I mean, by the end of 2021, right? No, sorry. By the end of 2020, I already had like 100,000 followers. Right. So we have all these locals. We have parents telling us what's going on with the schools. They're upset and whatnot. And then we're already seeing action in other counties. And we say, why not have our own school board rally and get parents out there to voice their opinion on what's going on in schools with the COVID protocols, with the critical race theory and stuff like that.
We had no idea where to start.
We had no idea where to start. And we just reposted I guess, like meet us at the school board right in front of Dade County
I mean, if you
schools.
remember, like even finding the schedule to the school board meetings, like
Right.
finding which ones were open, which ones were, what was going to be discussed. Like this was all research. And it all started because we were trying to get rid of the mask mandates for the kids. So we're like, where do we go? Do we go to the school board? Do we go to the Department of Education? Do we go to the governor? And it's like, well, yeah, we live in the freest state. It didn't matter. Like there were still the mask mandates, even though the governor had already lifted mask mandates. So, yeah, I think that the school board efforts were really
pivotal. It was a pivotal point for us.
Yeah.
You know, we
and the community, I think.
And the community for sure. And I think that why we're here, it's really to give a voice to Latinas like us that we feel, I guess you'd say, there's not any media that we're attracted to. Like we're not going to listen to Univision and Telemundo. In terms of like the Republican Party, there's not really anybody that represents us. We think most people are cringe. They don't, you know, and we have a very unique culture in South Florida. If you go to like LA and you know, you're out there with the Chicanos and Mexicans, it's not the same as it is here.
Correct.
So we debated for a very long time whether we would start off by running for local positions or starting a PAC, or we just didn't know what outlet to go to. And we chose to be the voice for Latino culture, especially South Floridians, you know.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why that is you saw the numbers during the 2020 election where Biden only won South Florida or Dade County by 13 points, whereas Clinton won by 30 points.
I like to think we had a lot to do with that. And
absolutely.
Turning the county purple and, you know, a joint effort of information, agitating news and alternate media sources and, you know, getting out there the counter and exposing people to maybe aspects of the presidential election that had otherwise been kept under wraps, you know, by the mainstream media.
Well, I had an array of people come to me in 2020 during the whole COVID thing. And it was like, I used to be a registered Democrat. Like, I'm still a registered Democrat, but I don't like this. I don't like that. Like, I don't agree with this. Like, I'm starting to shift more to the right. Like, or I've had people come up to me and say, like, you know, like, thank you for what you're doing. Like, I'm now Republican. Like, it happens all the time. It happens to Anthony in California, to all of our other friends. And we've certainly had an impact, so much so that, you know, once our efforts got local, we've been attacked so much.
Well, let's talk about that transition, right? So we're running these pages for several years on national platforms, 100,000 plus followers, and never was I attacked by Antifa, or, I mean, the press maybe sometimes will take one of my articles and twist it up or whatnot, but never like death threats and stalking and doxing
and trying to ruin our lives,
trying to get you fired and actual make a difference.
Contacting my affiliates so they could drop me from brands, like, oh, she's posting anti-vaccine content, like, you can't have this person promote your brands. And it's like, they follow me, you idiot. Like, they see my content. That's literally why they chose me. Are you an idiot?
They were, I mean, and to watch them do it to us was one thing. To watch them do it to regular old parents for absolutely no reason.
Right.
I think that knowing what we knew, that we had already been exposed to these large audiences for such a long time and never receiving that level of hate. And all it took was involvement in the school board meetings for 6 weeks. For us to be targeted. I think that we both knew that what we were doing was important. Like, this is absolutely ruffling feathers. There's a reason why we're getting attacked. There's a reason why our narratives, I mean, we're not talking about things that are untrue. We know for a fact that there has been over a dozen cases of child molestation that have been exposed in Dade County over the last year alone. We're talking about $15 million in settlements hush money that have been paid out to students with gag orders, and not allowing them to talk to the press about the fact that the
stuff that we find in the Miami Herald. This is stuff that we find in the Miami New Times, local Channel 10. Like, I'm not getting this. These aren't conspiracies. Like, I'm not getting this stuff out of, like, you know, some random Instagram page. Like, this is literally reported by the mainstream, mostly liberal media, I would say.
Well, it goes back to what we were saying, which is that it's not that these things are not being exposed. Like the media does cover them. It's just, does it get nationwide front page prime time coverage? And when it doesn't, then it's really easy to forget. And if you're leading a regular life, you've got a job, you got to take your kids to baseball practice, you got to go home, cook dinner, do laundry.
You're busy. You don't have the time.
You don't have time to verify over and over again. But it did become interesting that when the content starts getting pumped out, which is like, are you aware that there are rapist teachers like within our school system that are getting moved around from school to school, and that your school board is supporting that? It's the absolute shock in people's reaction to it. Like, what do you mean this is happening? Oh no, it's happening. And it's not just one case or two cases. We're talking about several cases.
It was like 12 to 15.
And it was, again, I'm sure you remember, first meeting, our arch nemesis, Miss Carla Marks is sitting there, and before any parent had even talked, Carla gets up on that microphone and discredits every single person there as a
far-right extremist,
conspiracy theorist. Parents that were there to have a say over their children's health, over what their kids were being taught, that were taking a peaceful part in the civic process that they are allowed to. Public school board meetings are public for a meeting and or for a reason, and open to the public for a reason. And to watch, again, I think that comes back to the hero complex that maybe we have to some degree. We were like watching moms get called conspiracy theorists, and we're like, absolutely not. Yeah. Now we've declared war against the school.
And we gotta definitely thank the haters, because they thought that threatening our livelihood and our lives and stuff, we'd say, oh, we're just going to be scared, and like, we're not going to do anything else. Like, delete your account. Like, okay, F you. We're going to take it up a notch. Like, Latinas, that we are not going to stop. We're not going to go anywhere. We're going to double down, and we're going to piss off our enemies even more.
So now here we are, mostly peaceful Latinas.
Mostly peaceful, and that's a key word. It's mostly peaceful. It's not fully peaceful, and it's definitely not peaceful at all. Mostly, though.
Most of the time. Yeah. We do not condone violence of any capacity, but we do encourage very loudly being involved in your civic process, and that's what we mean by not peaceful.
Right.
Linda, clearly, mostly peaceful Latinas, who we are culturally, our upbringings are so much a part of our perspectives when it comes to the world and politics and just in general. I think you've got, we both have different stories as being Latinas. You're an immigrant. Tell me a little bit about how, that transition leaving your country of origin to seek out the American dream, if you will. What do you remember about the experience, like looking at where we're at right now politically, and what it was that your family fled from? Like, what has that experience been like for you?
Yeah. So, I'll start off with saying that most people know, but I'm Colombian. I was born in Cali, Colombia. I immigrated here in 1999. So around that time, there was a very, I guess you'd say, insecure political climate in Colombia. The 80s I wasn't born back then. I was born in 88, but in the 80s, you had the cartels, the Medellin cartel against the Cali cartel, a lot of insecurity. Once, Pablo came down and all these people were captured, you still had lingering problems, lingering violence, lingering insecurity. And so we were a middle-class family. I went to private school. We weren't struggling. We would travel here and stuff like that. But there's just so many things that Americans born here don't realize that they have that we don't have. One of them being security, one of it being safe. So in Colombia, it was like, don't wear like those gold hoops, even if they're not gold, because they may steal them from you. Right? Like, you can't wear that Nike watch, not even a Rolex. I'm not talking about a $5,000 watch. I'm talking about a $200 watch, right? Like, don't wear that out or your new sneakers. Like, I remember getting this like badass sneakers from my uncle, like probably like $200, Nikes, like the latest ones and stuff for Christmas. And like, don't wear them outside of like your neighborhood. We lived in a close community, because they'll steal them from you. Like, I remember my mom got me a Pomeranian. My first dog was this Pomeranian. They actually bought it here, so we brought it back to Cali. And I wasn't allowed to walk him outside of my neighborhood because they were stealing, kidnapping dogs and then asking for ransom, you know?
Right.
So the kidnappings were also...
Isn't that happening in California?
That's now here, right? Yeah, that's really unfortunate, right? Like California, you're seeing that now. Today, actually, earlier I read that the 4 robbers followed a watch or a jewelry designer, or like, I don't know what you call them, jewelers, I guess, right? Sorry. And they robbed him at his home. So these are the type of things that we left our country for. Like we didn't want to live that way. Obviously, aside from the economic opportunity that you have here, that you're winning your money is in dollars and not in Colombian pesos, which is like worthless. Right. So, we came here and obviously we had to downsize. Like our money doesn't go as far because you have to convert pesos to dollars and stuff like that. I grew up in Hammocks. I grew up in Kendall. I went to Hammocks Middle School. It was a crazy culture shock because I came from like an all-nun school, like good, like uniform every day,
Catholic school.
Catholic school, very, very wholesome, very innocent. And I came here and my mom told me, she's like, look, kids don't wear uniforms here. And I'm like, what? Like, no, I still need to wear my uniform. So she takes me to Walmart and she buys me a uniform. She's like, I'm letting you know that I'm going to buy you this uniform. So like, you're going to go to your first day of school and you're going to be one of the only kids in uniform. And so I walk in with like the uniform and I was like one of the only kids in uniform. And I was like, damn, I feel like, like I feel left out. Like this is definitely a culture shock. And like a lot of the kids, like Kendall's a good neighborhood. Hammocks is not a bad neighborhood, but there's still a lot of ghetto kids, right? And like the kids were like their pants.
Well,
like,
I mean, welcome to Miami, right?
Right. So like the girls were like, like very like sexual makeup and whatever. And the boys were really grown up and like all these things. And I was like, oh my God, like this is crazy. I come from like this very wholesome school. Like we pray the rosary every freaking morning,
Yeah.
So that was interesting. And then, my mom, she's always been very strict, always wanted me to do more. I remember, coming home with like my first report card and I had like D's because I didn't speak the freaking language. Like I knew the language because my mom had me I had English school in Colombia, but I wasn't fluent. Like it's very different. You like in school, like learning than when you have to like read a science book. Right. So obviously, like, it was hard for me. My mom was like, no excuses. Like, I don't care. You have to get like B's and A's. And I was like,
the average Latino parent. Struggles
like,
to come over here and has a very high expectations of what you're going to accomplish now that you've been given the American card.
Right. So I had like no choice. Obviously, I did great. Eventually my mom, she made me apply for Coral Reef Senior High School and Magnet School, but I wanted to go to Varela because at this point I had friends and all my friends were going to go there and it was cool, whatever. So I apply and I get in and my mom was like, you have no choice. You're going to Coral Reef Senior High School. This is one of the best high schools in Miami, like a magnet school. You're going to go for business and finance and this is what's going to happen. And I had a tough time accepting that. And then it was like the best decision that my mom made for me because it was such an amazing high school experience. There was never any fights. All the kids were there to learn, to be someone. What
would that high school experience have looked like in Colombia?
I think I would have just stayed with my nun school because that's what my aunt did. My aunt went to the same school all the way to, what we call bachillerato, which is senior year, and then she went to university. So it would have been the same. I would have been, not the same, sorry, but I would have been like an all-Catholic nun school. Right. That would have been it. Yeah.
So you graduate.
So I graduated Coral Reef and I stay local. I say I'll go to FIU. Like I want to stay close to my mom,
Go Panthers.
Go Panthers. And it was also a great, great experience. One thing that I'll say is that as soon as I got my work permit, which was 15, I started working. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I didn't need to work. Like my stepdad was fine. My mom was fine. But like, I was so eager to earn dollars. I was like, I came here to like make money, So like first summer after I turned 15, I was like, I want to work. And so my mom and my stepdad were like, okay, fine. Like we're going to get you a secretary job with like your stepdad's dad. He had a State Farm,
Yeah.
office. So I spent the whole summer working with him, just doing, secretary stuff, like, whatever.
Filing, picking up phones, sorting
Filing and
mail.
like the best. I did that. And also in high school, like at some point I was like working as a barista at a coffee shop in the falls. And it was like the best job. Like
How
I loved
liberal
it.
of you.
I loved it. No, but it wasn't Starbucks, it was cozy. It was different. It was different. They don't have it here anymore. After that it closed down. But anyways, I go to college and I go for business, international business. So my whole entire mentality was that I was going to work for a global corporation. That's why I wanted to do international business, eventually move around the world, go through the, corporate ladder and stuff like that. So I do that. And after I graduated college, I already had some background in the liquor industry because once I turned 21, I started doing promos and like gigs and whatever. And I say, you know what, I am going into the liquor industry. Like I'm gonna apply.
Isn't that the beauty of this country? You said I'm gonna work for a global conglomerate and did that. And I'm gonna work for the liquor industry.
Yeah,
did that. And name one other place in the entire world where opportunities are so easily available.
And the same thing in college. Like I got a scholarship, and then I think the other way that I paid for college was like financial aid. So like my college was like basically paid for. Amazing. You know what I mean? It was like, it was amazing. Like my mom had actually saved up for me to go to college and she didn't have to use any of that money because I did so well that everything was like paid off. So I apply for Heineken. I get the job at Heineken. I'm 24 years old. I'm working for literally one of the biggest and best global brands in the world. Like my network is like insane. Like I can talk to people from Spain, Amsterdam, like anywhere, France. And I do that for about 5 years. I get to travel. I get to go to the best events, ultra VIP backstage. Like not even VIP, like literally like backstage. Like I'm like hanging out with Diplo. You know what I mean? Like get to go to Coachella, do all these amazing things. And then I loved my job. I still like love Heineken, but at some point I was like, dude, you know what? Like I'm here in the United States of America. Like this is the American dream. Like I need to be a business owner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, sure, I have a car, I had gas, I had a credit card, I had this, but like I need to be a business owner. Like this is what I came here for, right? Like I need to do something. So in 2016, I quit my job and I started Connect Colombia. I don't have that business anymore. I let it go during COVID. And it was a travel agency and, in Cartagena and Medellin. And everyone's like, you're so crazy. I can't believe you're going to do that. Like, how are you going to do that? And I was like, don't you worry about it. I'm just going to do it. Like,
Watch.
I have the internet, dude. Like, I can do anything. And so, like, I literally self-taught myself all these things, watched YouTube videos, made a website, the whole thing. And it worked out. You know what I mean? Like, it worked out. Like, I had to struggle for a while. I had to take other jobs. I was like, I think I told you, I was like pretending to bartend. Like, my friend Martin, he has like this huge staffing agency. And he's like, dude, like, if you want to like do like staffing events with me for like Miami Music Week or like Art Basel. And I was like, yeah, like I'll do it. And then I started just like literally like pretending to bartend so I could just make money on the side. And it was like I'll be at like one time I worked a wedding and they were like, kind of how a margarita. And I was like, oh shit, like I don't know how to make a freaking margarita. Dude, like
just want
I
something
just wanted
simple,
like a rum and
screwdriver.
Coke. Yeah. And I was like on my phone, like, okay, like how much do I have to measure? Like, so I think that was a great experience. And now I'm in e-commerce, as you know, and I'm a Latina influencer, I guess you'd say.
The full trajectory of like immigrating over here and like having nothing and then moving on into this position where you're taking advantage of quite literally every opportunity that's offered.
Only in the United States. Only here.
Only in the United States.
Things like this don't really happen. Even my cousin, who was an architect, like in Cali, like her parents were fine. They were well off. They own a house. They own this. They pay for her college.
Yeah, it's an adjustment. I mean, it's not like you don't have, a housekeeper in Colombia and a certain lifestyle that you're sacrificing that just to come over here and be able to struggle and have to work. And that's how much value immigrants put
for the American dream.
For the American dream.
From the American dream. So that's my story, condensed. And what about you? Tell us about your family, your background, your story.
I come, I'm a multi-generational commie slayer, if you will. So, my family left communist Cuba after my grandfather's passing. My grandmother, 2 years after my grandfather had fought with the rebels against the regime. And when my grandfather passes away in a car accident, 2 years after that, my grandmother is arrested. She was smuggling guns from Havana to the mountains, to El Escambray. So in the blood, what can I say? What can I say? So grandma gets caught being an absolute badass against the commies. And my grandmother spent 9.5 years in prison. And when she first got locked up, my dad was only 6 years old. So my dad goes almost 10 years without his mom. So an orphan, his father had just passed. So when my grandmother gets out, clearly living in Cuba as an ex-political prisoner, and now you're out, it's just, you can't get work, your kids are treated differently. Yeah. So your life is big ruined, priority, basically. Correct. So a big priority was getting out. Would I love to go to the United States? Sure, but that wasn't an opportunity. So my parents actually left through Venezuela, which opens up a whole nother can, because now my parents, after living in Venezuela for 6 years, didn't just see communism take over Cuba, but now they've also watched communism take over Venezuela. So in Venezuela, I talk about this often because my parents spent 6 years in Venezuela visiting the offices that needed to be visited, filling the paperwork that had to be filled, providing the documentation that had to be filled, in order to be able to legally come into the U.S. And I think that that's so important, that process, because since as far back as I could remember, my family had such an appreciation for coming to America, working in America, creating a future for yourself in America. Stand up, do the Pledge of Allegiance, stand up, look, that's your flag. You're an American. I would say, I'm Cuban, and you're not Cuban. You are American. And I remember this sense of like pride of finally being able to break into La Yuma, to come into the U.S. and to have their daughter born here in America, a month shy of then coming to the country. I'm born. And what it does is that it creates almost like a sense of appreciation, because I've talked to individuals that maybe had an easier path of getting into the States that don't hold the same appreciation for it. So because my parents always raised me with that level of appreciation for the opportunities that you have available. I was not a straight A student like you, Linda. I was an absolute disaster. I dropped out of high school when I was 16 years old, got my GED, and then immediately said, I'm a high school dropout, just like Kanye.
That's where I was going to college.
Almost immediately, I did start college because I'm like, all right, I don't want to be, but I didn't feel like it fit for me.
Right.
So while I was in college, I start working corporate, and I start making a lot of money very early on in my 20s. And I'm like, go to school to become a teacher.
For what?
End up with $20,000 of school student loans to make $35,000 a year. Yeah, I'm straight. I'm not doing that. I'm going to be rich. I'm in real estate. That's what I was doing in my early 20s. Anyways, the market crashed, but I remember that it was always, particularly because I didn't have a college degree, there was always a big emphasis on what my accomplishments were professionally. So just like you, I had to go. I wanted to climb the corporate ladder. I wanted to study. Didn't care if I started off at a call center. I wanted to work my way up, and so I did. And I developed somebody without a degree, and I developed a whole.
Which is the beauty of this country too, right? Like, how many people do we know that like literally were like painting houses? Nothing wrong with that, of course. We're not saying it, but like they become like multimillionaires. Or like the dog guy. You know the story about the dog guy, the dog whisperer. He came through like the border with like $100, and he was like homeless, and then he like worked at like a shaving. What is it called? Cleaning dogs.
Do you know who gave him his break? Reese Witherspoon apparently finds him somewhere, and is it Reese? I want to say it's Reese Witherspoon that gives him
like
his
an illegal that came like illegally through here. Like gave his last $100 to like come through the border. So like only like you don't hear those stories in like, oh, I went to Mexico, like crossed the border, and then I became like, it's so hard. That's why so many people in our home countries start like, illegal, like doing things like illegally, because it's just
there's no pathway. There's no pathway to success. Right. There's no pathway to success. So dude, I had the same epiphany, 10 years in training and development. I got to travel and open up call centers all over the country. I spent 2 years living in Puerto Rico, 2 years living in LA. It was just nonstop. And the only way that I've always been able to describe it is like, I feel like I got to like the penthouse suite of where I wanted to go at, and I opened up the curtains and saw the view, and I'm like, meh, not enough. And then that's when I
that's
decided.
what happened to me. As everybody thought I was crazy for leaving my corporate job.
Your 401k, your fancy things. And, I set off on my journey. I wanted to get into sales. I wanted to make six figures and I wanted to make money and I remember in 2018, I had that big epiphany where, again, I got bit by the bug that I think bites so many Americans, which is like, I don't want to work for somebody else anymore. I want to work for myself and I want to make my own schedule and I want to be independent.
Right.
And I remembered that my parents, with nothing, they didn't even speak the language. Both of my parents ended up opening up businesses and became business owners in America. My father is a handyman, but nonetheless doesn't answer to anybody.
Right.
He is his own boss. My mom opened up her own little medical billing company where I remember her passing her little courses, staying up late, studying, just to be able to say, this is mine. Yeah. And I felt so inspired by that and knowing that nothing would make my parents prouder than to take this opportunity of being an American, like they've clarified for me so many times, of taking this opportunity that my parents sacrificed for and truly making something out of it. And here we are. The absolute testament of, the American dream and what our parents initially set off to provide for us when they migrated to this country.
And that's the voice that we want to give people, right? Like we've said it before, there's not a lot of conservative or right-wing Latinos that think like us, that want to be part of the culture, that want to change the culture as well. There's a lot of I guess like the older generation Cubans here that listen to Radio Mambi and other people, like it's just not like, it's not our vibe. It doesn't resonate with us. And so we want to start this. We want to talk about obviously our political climate, but we also want to talk about culture. We want to bring in interesting guests. It's going to be open format. It's not going to just be like every single day we're going to like talk about Joe Biden. Like we don't even talk about Joe Biden every day.
I don't acknowledge him.
I don't acknowledge him. Like I don't even know what he's up to today. I'll hear about like what he's doing here and there. But like we certainly want to give a voice to Latinos like us, whether it's you that you're second generation, right?
First generation born.
Or somebody like me who's like an immigrant and has been able, I still want to do so much more. Like I don't think I have even achieved like my full American dream, right?
The full potential.
So that's what we're going to do here every single week.
That's what
hopefully we grow enough where it's just more than once a week.
Yeah.
Right?
We want to see how everybody vibes of our content.
We want to see people vibing.
People are going to be like, oh my God, they're so cringe. Where's that accent from? Why do they sound like that?
It's the Miami accent, bro. The 305.
Come on, guy.
So that's, I think, it for us.
Are we done? Is this our first episode?
This is our first episode, yes.
High five.
High five.
We really did that, guys. This has been 6 months of procrastinating and analysis paralysis, and finally we did it. I can't believe that we got episode 1 under our belt, and we are so stoked on this new adventure that we're starting off with you guys, and we look forward to bringing you new and exciting, entertaining content
every week,
and bringing some humor to the absolute clown world that we're all experiencing right now.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for tuning into our first episode, and we'll see you next week.
See you next time.